driving in the future. The most amazing thought leader in the logistics area, transportation. He's not the head of Waymo, and he wasn't in the original group that was in the DARPA challenge, $1 million prize to see who could get a driverless car across the desert. But he is such a smart person. The vision that he had was to look at the world's best logistics distribution system, and he found the human cardiovascular system, and he took that as the most efficient transportation system in the world. And then he made a parallel equivalent, and literally he went piece by piece, and he said, okay, first of all, it's not flat, it's 3D. So we need to elevate and put bridges and tunnels and trains overhead and magnetic pods, all these things. That's number one. Number two, he said, you can't have dedicated things. Blood cells deliver energy to every cell in the body. They don't say, oh, this is my Mercedes. No, this is my Lexus. No. He really advocated this massive public transportation that it's like a train and then breaks off into wagons, so it becomes like a bus, and then it breaks off into individual pods and it becomes like a car. That combines the benefits of public mass transit with I need to reach my door. This whole having a car for each of us, but having that transportation system in the future, that makes sense. And the speeds, oh my God, once it flows freely, it becomes zooming in and zooming out, and all these things are connected and algorithms are running the whole thing, and you're rolling at 200 miles an hour, 2 inches apart. It's amazing to watch. He showed some simulations in his TED Talk, and this looks great, looks fantastic. He also showed that we have to share the road. So this whole example of a bus in China, the wheels are on the side, but in the middle it's hollow and the people are on top. It's like a double-decker where you take out the first floor, and in that first floor is where cars can circulate, and it goes over 2 lanes. It's fantastic. That thing can be zooming in and flying by over the cars. Phenomenal. Those are great ideas. But yes, the future of transportation, for sure, driverless, for sure. It's funny because a lot of people were thinking, can these cars drive like a human? And some other folks were like, no, I don't want these cars to drive like a human. I don't trust humans. We should expect these cars to drive better than humans because they can just see many more things. Like everything else, there's going to be accidents and there's going to be stories. We can safely say that this is going to happen, but again, when? And this is the biggest one because driverless cars, they've been talking about this since world fairs of I don't know how many years ago. And people at this point, they're jaded. They don't think it's happening. To everybody that you talk to, it's like, yeah, it's 30, 40 years at least. So the question is, can they do it in 15? Can they do it in 10? Now, there's also 5 levels of automation for cars. So it goes from your like standard level 0, which is your cruise control, and level 1, it brakes for you, and level 2. So it continuously takes more and more until you get to like level 5, doesn't even have a steering wheel. Level 4 is completely autonomous. Level 3 is like semi, half and half. Which level will be disrupted? I think level 3 will be disrupted because then you can disconnect for a while and you can do other things. I think we are going to become more productive. Right now, the cities do tend to become larger. The plan is that the world population will be clustered around 50 megacities of 80 to 120, 150 million people each. You're going to have to cover some interstates. Those cities are going to be the size of entire states. And I'm not even going to talk about flying cars and things like that, because if people already have a problem with driverless, even though Boeing and Airbus and all those folks are getting into it, but if you think that we're gonna have thousands of helicopters running around the city, then fine. But I think right now, I'm just gonna assume cost prohibitive until they find a new fuel source or a new magnetic something that allows them to hover without needing to be a helicopter, which are not cheap at all. So I'm not gonna leave flying cars on the side, but high-speed trains, I think, have changed and revolutionized China. They went from having a mess of a train system to having high-speed railways cross. I think many other countries are going to follow. Obviously, Europe was the precursor, and they seem to be doing great with it. You go from downtown to downtown, you show up, you get off. It's very practical. And so I think in the mega cities, originally I would have told you that it's going to allow people to move from the suburbs and take a speed train and live 3 hours away and then catapult into the city every day. But unfortunately, with cities this big of 100 million people, speed trains can transport people from one end to the city to the other. They're going to be that big. It's going to be interesting. I also don't know, as weather patterns change, I don't know if vertical is still going to be the thing or if we're going to move more towards horizontal and expand. It's instead of New York, more like LA. We shall see, but it's an unpredictable. We don't know how crazy it's going to get. We don't know. There's been enough sci-fi movies to know that when the tipping point hits, it's going to be really bad, but we're not there. I think the nice part of the future is that it's moving away from a little bit of this utilitarian architecture. There's some great examples. Bjarke Ingels and Ma Yanzong. Ma Yanzong is an amazing Chinese architect. And Ma, he's trying to not copy the West in terms of architecture, not have another New York, because the initial big cities in Shenzhen, and when you look at some of these big cities in China, unfortunately, yeah, they have all these skyscrapers and they have them nicer and they have them newer, but Ma is trying to go in a different direction, more of a natural design, bring in elements from nature, and he's building stadiums inside of volcanoes, not real volcanoes, but he designs a volcano-like structure and inside there's a stadium. When you look at it from above, it's like this volcanoes and mountains, but it's an entire city underneath, all this greenery and all this grass. I love the fact that China has the sensitivity and the forward thinking and the hunger to be different enough to really put money into it. So some of these new mega cities that are going to emerge out of China are going to be architecturally beautiful, stunning, so different, very different from what we have in the West. And I hope that it catches on. I hope that people look at that and say, oh, you know, for this mall that we're going to build, this metroplex that we're going to build in the Midwest, let's get inspired. Let's do these amazing things. So the architecture is going to be beautiful. The city plan will be functional. It's going to be data-based. So just a little bit like they built Brasilia, it's going to be a better plan and better, you know, there's going to be a lot of data informing the decisions. So I think that part is going to be better done, not just sprawl. But then the big component is going to be just the sheer size. How do we get around that? And that's where this transportation of the future comes in. And I love Wani's at some point says, as if magnetic pods and trains that break into buses that break into car pod, these multi-level communications grid, if that wasn't exotic enough, then on top of that, we have the speed and the fact that it needs to be driverless. I wouldn't want my teenagers to be driving in that environment.